Good evening to everybody. Good evening to everybody. Today I'm launching this series of YouTube videos and some live sessions addressing some important issues related to understanding several subjects related to the workplace, related to the capacity building, related to different areas that are needed for development. But why talking about capacity building? And what's the confusion about capacity building in general? You see a lot of the times people talk about training sessions here and there, and whenever there is a training session here and there, they would call it capacity building. To what extent that's true, and what is really capacity building, and what's the relation between capacity building and training itself, and how they can be interconnected, to what extent we need to understand this kind of relationship, and can we call at any time that a training session or a training course or whatever as capacity building or part of the capacity building. This is what I'm going to clarify in this session today. And the idea behind that is actually there has been a lot of confusion about it on the one side. On the other side is actually there has been a lack of clear understanding of capacity building and the need for capacity building over several decades actually for that. Only few organizations here and there over the world have really understood what is capacity building and how they can use that for development of their organizations. Okay. So when we talk about capacity building, there are three key areas we need to take into consideration to address that. In what sense? In the sense that these three key areas need to streamline together and need to be functioning in alignment together in order to be productive and in order at the same time to help a lot of the organizations and individuals maximize their potentials and reach up to the levels they are seeking in their performance at the individual as well as organizational level. These three key areas actually are related to human capital development, organizational development, and institutional and legal framework development. How they are related and why we need to take or cover these three key areas when we talk about capacity building. This is, of course, related to the idea behind creating kind of a change, introducing kind of a change, or seeing a different direction for the organization, working on that, developing the organization. So we need to establish this cycle of the capacity building as a process, which actually goes through four core activities in general. The four core activities in the capacity building process or cycle would take into consideration the assessment and benchmarking, which is the baseline, where we start, what the points of starting of that. So we call it sometimes diagnostic assessment or pre-assessment or initial assessment in order to identify the baseline. And for this baseline to take into consideration as a starting point, and based on that, we set up certain kind of benchmarks. And these benchmarks would be actually the reference points we need to compare with when we make the development. After that, we need to set the action plan or the action planning in general, because we might have several actions plans related to the organizational level, individual level, or the occupational level in general. Then, based on these action plans, we start implementing the activities, the implementation part of the activities of the capacity building in general. And of course, when we do that, there will be kind of monitoring and evaluation going across all levels, and at the same time working on that. So we do reassessment, evaluation, and we learn what was done. Because with the action plan we have, we identify certain landmarks we need to achieve, and we identify certain objectives to achieve. And based on that, we document all the process in order to see have we achieved what we set as benchmarks in the beginning, what kind of actions we set in the beginning. And based on that, we conduct the assessment, reassessment, and evaluation, and we see what we learned. And then we start the cycle all over again with the assessment and a new level or a higher level of benchmarks in order to continue the cycle and the process as a system and not as a separate action plan here and there. These are the four key areas for conducting the capacity building process. What comes under each one of these areas actually is very important and interesting. Under key area one, for example, with regards to the human capital development, we need to identify or take into consideration four steps to make that work, to make that successful. And step number one is actually to know the return on investment on the human capital development, which we are targeting, whether a group of individuals or certain department organization or the whole organization, on whatever level, we need to set that first. Next step is to analyze the human capital we have. So we conduct the full analysis of the human capital in terms of their existing capacities, in their existing competences, knowledge, skills, attitudes, behaviors, things like that. And then three, we develop the human capital. And number four, we conduct the evaluation of the human capital's development. Take into consideration these several factors. And under this, actually, step number four, we need to take into consideration the five following factors in terms of compliance, in terms of customer satisfaction, culture management, cost control, and contribution of the human capital to the whole development of the organizations. Why we need to conduct that? Because this actually will lead to many benefits, and these many benefits can be taken into consideration as identifying, first of all, 8 benefits of investing in the human capital development. The first one is that this will increase the employee satisfaction. So whatever employees you have, their satisfaction will be increased by conducting this development. They would feel that they are valued, and this value makes them more satisfied about their workplaces. The second one, it helps improve retention rates. So you keep your employees for longer time. So there is no quick or high turnover of the employees, like leaving the job in this organization and moving to another organization, because they feel they are valued, they are respected, and they are being developed. So in this sense, they feel more satisfaction, and at the same time, they decide to stay in the organization. The number three is develop employee engagement. They are more engaged. In one of the studies conducted by Gallup Institution, in the United States, for example, they said that more than 65% of the employees in almost all organizations across the United States and some other organizations, other countries in the world are disengaged, which means they are not actually fully heart and body in their jobs, which means their productivity is less, their satisfaction is less, and so many other things. And this is a waste of the human resource and the human capital they have. And then you develop a client engagement. So when you take care of your internal clients, internal employees, they are satisfied, they are engaged, their productivity will increase, they are happy in their workplace. This would reflect positively on your clients. And then your clients will be engaged more and more at higher levels. And then with that, you improve the return on investment. So you are investing on these human capitals you have, you are developing in your organization, that would reflect on them. It would increase the return. So what you gain, the profits you gain from developing your human capital and human resources. And this would improve the overall organization communication because they are more engaged, more satisfied. They feel the good relationship with the clients. So employment engagement, client engagement, more satisfaction, higher level of productivity, better communication at the level of the organization. And at the same time, it would give a better image of the whole organization, leading to better recruitment. So you would have better culture and atmosphere in your organization, would attract more talents and more people who would be willing to work for this organization. And that would increase to a higher level or a greater level of company culture. This is with regards to the first, which is very important and very critical, and in most cases it is ignored actually, the human capital development, the first key area. The second key area is organizational development. The organizational development, we take the whole organization as one unit or as a whole, which addresses certain core aspects of the development of any organization at any time. So we need to identify what is the organizational development, what would be the goals for the organizational development, why we need to do the organizational development, and then to set some examples of interventions in order to conduct this evaluation, this organizational development, and then how the human resources and organizational development relate, to what extent we have the relation between the human resources we have available as a human capital core, as we talked about quickly and briefly in the first key area, how this is related to the interventions conducted for the organizational development. And then the organizational development process as a whole, what we need to do in terms of the four key functions in the capacity building process for that. And then we move to key area number 3, which is institutional and legal framework development. And this, of course, this area would vary from one organization to another, from one country to another, from one legal status, whether it is, for example, a government agency, it is semi-government agency, or it is a private sector agency, small companies, startup companies, small and medium enterprises, big corporations. So depending on the size and magnitude and the scope of work under each one of these organizations, there needs to be some kind of institutional development, and there needs to be some kind of addressing to certain policies that need to be taken into consideration for developing the institutional and legal aspects for them. To what extent the functions that can be carried out by this organization, be it a startup, be it an SME, small and medium enterprise, be it a big corporation, be it, for example, a merger corporation, whatever, or multinational organization or corporation. So it depends on the legal nature and identity of this organization. These policies and the legal framework would change, and that would reflect on the organizational structure, the relationship between the different parts and departments, and that would help us define where we need to introduce certain institutional and legal interventions in order to make this happen for the organization as a key area number 3. And of course, for all these 3 levels and the 3 areas, we can see some kind of relation in a way or another to training in general. And the training is actually not a capacity building in itself, it's actually a tool, it's a way used for the capacity building as overall. So you can use several issues, several ways, and several methods of interventions, including training as a tool for that, in order to achieve what we need to achieve in terms of the capacity building. And this will be a more detailed topic later on to talk about the training in general, training needs assessment, why we need to conduct a training needs assessment, and how training needs assessment is conducted in a way that is related to capacity building. Because under the training needs assessment, we distinguish 3 levels actually of training needs assessment: the organizational assessment, the occupational assessment, and the individual assessment. For the organizational assessment, we take into consideration what would be the skills, knowledge, and the abilities required for the performance of the whole organization to function together and to function well in order to achieve the set benchmarks based on the pre-assessment or assessment and benchmarking activity in the first cycle of the process of capacity building. And then at the occupational assessment, if we have, for example, some organization that decide to move in a certain direction or change the direction of their production, of their services, of their line of business, or whatever. So that would introduce kind of a change and a shift in the way of doing business. So while introducing this shift, there will be gap in the occupations conducted by this organization towards what's needed in order to achieve or sustain this shift and this change. So here we need that occupational assessment to identify which occupational discrepancies that exist, what gaps have been created or existing, and based on that to address these gaps through the kind of capacity building needed. But this kind of training-based assessment is required for them. And the third level is the individual assessment, which analyzes actually how well individual employee is doing a job and to what extent that determines their capacity to do a new job or a different job according to the new direction of the organization. This is kind of a quick linkage or relationship between training as in terms of the training needs assessment and how it is related to capacity building. Of course, more of that is going to happen. More of that is going to be clarified, explained, and addressed in more details in order to see to what extent we can introduce a system of capacity building for organizations and individuals, and how that can be related to training in general, and what areas of training needs to be take into consideration for establishing that system of capacity building as a whole. Of course, all our videos and discussions would take into consideration the timing between 15 to probably 17 or up to maximum 19 minutes of these videos. And by this note, I would like to end here this video, and I will reschedule for other videos and sessions in the few days to come to continue on these topics. Good evening to everybody, and thank you for watching and following up. Thank you.